As the search gets underway in earnest for a permanent Boston school superintendent, parents and community leaders are trying to make sure their voices are heard. In a statement of what they want to see in the next superintendent, 12 organizations have identified 4 priorities. To explain, are members from 2 of the organizations, a co-chair of the Citywide Parent Council, Lucas Orwig, and an attorney who's the chair of the Education Committee for the Boston NAACP, José Lopez. Thank you both for being with us.
Well, thank you for having us.
I want to start with Lucas. What about what's the first thing you want to see in a new superintendent?
Well, I think our 2 top priorities, I guess, I named 2 of them because they kind of go hand in hand, are a superintendent who's an educational leader first, who is really focused on setting up that system for ensuring that students are getting the teaching and learning that they need. And I think that needs to come from the superintendent. And second, we're hoping that the superintendent can really build out the engagement infrastructure to fully reach out to parents, students, the community in a different way, in a deeper, more authentic way.
Jose, what about leadership? Tommy Chang was an experienced educator. He said a lot of things I think that a lot of parents would agree with, but what's the missing piece?
Well, I think for Superintendent Chang, he wasn't sure, I think, on how to utilize central office and what its role was in serving parents and families within the city. He had a very specific guideline that he was using and how he wanted to use central office, and his philosophy was central office really should not set a lot of the tone and really shouldn't dictate what's going on in schools. Let's leave that up to schools individually to figure out. And I don't think schools ever really grasped on that idea. I think we're looking for a superintendent that's really going to set the tone on the 4 issues that we've outlaid in our document that we've written together. 2 of those are very important when we talk about someone who's a proven school leader, so someone who has demonstrated through their history that they can take a school system like Boston, similar to Boston, and move it and get traction on some very important areas. We talk about student achievement, we talk about college readiness. Right now, about 30% of BPS children that are entering our colleges, universities, are spending money on remedial courses and learning how to be at college. So we need someone who can take those measures and push the envelope on each of those, and community engagement is going to be a big piece because our families have to be connected.
Lucas, a lot of the failings that were talked about with the past superintendent were administrative. So how important is it really to have a background as a classroom educator?
Well, I think we need someone who can really understand the issues that happen in the classroom, that can know what it is like to be a teacher, understand the student experience, because having that deep understanding can really ensure that superintendent is going to be setting policies and supporting building leaders in the ways that they need. And I think having managerial experience is excellent, and it's sort of necessary for an organization the size of the Boston Public Schools. But it's really, at the end of it, it comes down to the education that's happening there, and that's the expertise that you can only earn through experience.
Hearing about Jose, as far as dedication to closing the achievement gap, it sounds like the sort of thing a superintendents say all the time. What do they need to do to show they really meet it?
Chris, you're right. I haven't met one superintendent that said they want to widen the gap, right? So that hasn't happened. But let's look at what works. We know that a diverse representation of teaching faculty to students makes a difference. Those connections have been made. Right now, our district is, as we all know, in violation of a federal court order in terms of staffing when it comes to Black teachers. And we have some very specific recommendations on how to close those gaps. In Boston right now, most hiring decisions are based at a school site. We need a superintendent who's going to know how to manage that, who's going to know how to see principals for what they bring to the table, make sure that they have input on how their schools run, but also push the envelope on the measures that we know will increase student engagement, diversity in our faculty. And so I think a superintendent who has demonstrated that they've done that historically, that they've worked in school districts to increase diversity, that they've worked in school districts where they're able to narrow the education gaps. That's what we're going to be looking for, because here in Boston, those are some of our biggest challenges.
This has been a news, and we're talking with Lucas Orwig from the Citywide Parent Council and José Lopez from the Boston NAACP. Lucas, another thing these organizations want is shared decision-making. We've seen decision-making processes that go back and forth, not always smoothly. What would you like to see done differently?
Well, so I think this connects back to the last question about closing the achievement gap, because I think engagement is an equity issue in itself. When we have engagement infrastructure that is designed around your ability to attend and successfully present at school committee meetings and the various other meetings, it sort of limits the voices that show up in the conversation. I think what we really need to see is a superintendent that recognizes that parents and students are the experts of their own experience, and that is willing to build out the structures needed to really reach out and find those voices that don't get heard. Because understanding how the decisions that the central office makes is going to impact everyone in the system is essential for making a good decision. And I think when you have voices that are just missing, then we get choices made that benefit some and harm others. And I think the only way to correct that is to really build out the infrastructure that we need to get everyone's voice into the picture.
Jose, another requirement here is for a superintendent who's an education advocate, who's resolute and astute. Being resolute means sort of standing up to the State House to get money, standing up to the mayor. What does it mean?
I think being resolute means that we choose an individual who is resolved that education will always come first, that decisions made in the best interest of our children will always lead first, that in every decision that's made, they're asking themselves, is this going to help us at the bottom line? Are we going to be able to engage with parents? Are we going to be able to engage with our students? And are these going to help yield outcomes? So to me, to be resolved really means to be resolved to educational outcomes and seeing parents and children not just as recipients of services, but as community stakeholders, people who have this experience, who want to add to the conversation and who want to be a part of. Because on the other side of that, Chris, is it's really the only other place where we can find accountability, okay? We have a school committee right now that is an appointed school committee. We have a superintendent search committee that was appointed by the school committee. So parents and even our young students, our young adult students are looking for ways to be part of not just problems, but help bring solutions. And so I think that's what we're trying to get at, and a superintendent who's resolved, okay, on meeting us at those places.
Yeah, we're really looking for a partner. You know, there's these groups that are on this list of sign on to the statement that are spending a lot of time and energy advocating, and we need a superintendent who's going to join us in that fight and not be. We don't want to be in opposition. We want to help them do the better job that we need them to do to serve our kids well.
All right, thank you both, Lucas Orwig and Jose Lopez. In a moment, barriers faced by the early education workforce. We'll talk about a new report with researchers from UMass Boston.